We are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Indie Author Live chat. And welcome, David, to the channel. It's so good to have you.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, I'm super excited to chat because we have a lot of science fantasy lovers in the channel. And you write epic slash steampunk fantasy, which is quite a mashup. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you write?
Yeah, so just basic introduction. As you said, I'm David Trotter. I'm from a small town in Arkansas. Got into reading when I was a young man, probably about 10 or 12. Really got into some of the old classics, Narnia, Lord of the Rings, and such. Since then, I've kind of branched out into different kinds of reading and literature, and really got picked up on the indie reading scene a few years back. I follow a couple different YouTubers that are booktubers, and they started talking about some indie reads, and I was kind of feeling like um, got to be really careful here because I love a lot of my trad authors as well, my trad stories, but it kind of was feeling very formulaic. And I started picking up some indie works, and I was like, wow, these people are able to tell kind of a unique story, and it's a little bit different, and it's not the most common themes, and I really just fell in love with it, and really got into reading a couple of those authors, and then I was like, hey, I've got some stories bouncing around in my old noggin upstairs, and so I just kind of got into writing my own story, and it started probably in 2018, and I finally got it published near the end of like 2021. So it was a labor of love. Took quite a bit of time to get it out there. You're on mute.
Ah, my mic glitched
Yeah,
on me for a
It's
second.
it's all good. Happens to the best of
Sorry.
us.
So yeah, your love of reading really then brought you into this journey.
Absolutely.
Yes. You've got some really amazing covers. So before I ask you story-ish questions, did you
Yeah.
do your own cover art?
I did not. I am not artistically inclined at all. I can tell you the story of my artist because he's awesome. If you'll allot me like 3 seconds.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so I went to school in the University of Arkansas in Fort Smith campus, a satellite campus of the big university. And there I had some friends who went into t-shirt designs afterwards. They opened their own company, Cider Designs, and they do their own t-shirt printings and stuff. But for some of their more artistic design shirts, they had a friend of theirs who also went to the same school as me. And when I was querying for cover artists, they're like, hey, this guy kind of mashes some of the style of the story snippets that we've read. And they linked me up with a gentleman by the name of Aaron Moschner. And he's done all my artwork. He does all the artwork that goes inside all of my books, so not just cover art, but the
Wow.
chapter headers and some of the full page illustrations that are in the books.
We have an indie author who wants to know, is it extremely expensive to have commissioned art?
That depends. And so that's one of the great things about working with like smaller artists, and it depends on what you're going for, right? Like if you want full cover, full color artwork, that can get a little bit pricey, but also, um, for me, I did a Kickstarter to
Mm.
raise some money for my editing and for my artwork. And so the way it kind of worked is my artist and I shared some of the profits at the Kickstarter to cover to cover the art in the first one. We both decided that wasn't the best idea. So for my next book, I built in the costs of the artwork into my Kickstarter so that way I could pay him up front because
Hmm.
we felt like it was. And I know I don't want to get into the whole AI debate that's going on right now with
Yeah,
AI
yeah.
art, but I really appreciated getting exactly what I wanted. But I also gave my artist a lot of freedom to design it the way he felt like it read,
Mm.
which allowed him to put his own perspective in my work.
Mm.
So it's kind of cool so it can range though when you're looking for artists. Find something you like, find somebody you like, and find somebody that you're willing to work with. And just like getting a haircut, always leave a nice tip.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
absolutely. Um, And I've had a similar experience just looking for artists. Good
Hmm.
artists can start straight out of school or going to school for very affordable rates. And then professionals that do covers for like the big four, they're going to be, over
Hmm.
$1,000. You're looking at a lot of money. So it's really what you're looking for and who you go to.
Absolutely. So I will say that like there's a lot of also like pre-designed covers that like there's some really good groups out there that they do pre-designed covers that you can kind of they'll tweak them for you a little bit, and that was something I kind of looked at. But everybody's going to have their own style, and I know here in a second you'll see kind of mine. I would say if you're looking for a cover that has a lot of humanoid characters or characters on the cover, I would definitely lean towards getting an artist that you can communicate with very clearly. I went with a more logo badge style for each of mine.
Mm-hmm, hmm. Yes, and it's a gorgeous cover. Do you have the book with you?
I don't have it in front of me. I'm so sorry. I'm
No,
at my
it's
lunch.
okay.
I'm at my lunch break at work.
Oh, thank you for hopping on your lunch
Oh
break.
no, no, it's absolutely fine. I'm really blessed. I love my job, so this is not a problem at all.
Do
I
your
wish I could
coworkers
pull
know
them.
you, right?
Yes. Yes, they definitely know I write. A couple of them have even read it, and so I let one of them actually name one of the characters. I let him base it off of me,
Oh,
so it's a lot of fun.
oh, that's awesome. So, what made you decide to sort of go the traditional route? I know you mentioned, you still got a lot of love for your traditional authors, and I know many of us do.
Yeah, so there's kind of two different things, and if you'll allow me a little bit of a sad story
Oh,
without feeling too gloomy, okay? Um, so I have three wonderful kids. My wife and I've been
mm.
married for we're going to celebrate 10 years next year. So we've
Oh,
been married for a
congrats.
while now. But we went through a hardship a few years ago. We were expecting triplets and we lost them. And writing became a big coping mechanism for me. And I actually had a friend of mine who got traditionally published.
Mm.
A smaller deal, you wouldn't even know their name, right? Because and that's the other thing. Just because you get traditionally published doesn't mean you're going to be a New York Times bestseller and
Mm,
your name's up in lights.
mm,
Because it can mean different things per your contract. But they were talking to me and giving me a lot of advice, but they were sharing some woes of how much of their story had to be changed, or kind of like they're like, well, you really should cut this one so it's more marketable, and you need to add this so it's more in line with your genre.
mm.
And for me, because my writing was a coping mechanism for some of the stuff that I went through, I didn't really want to be told that no, you need to change this character's anything, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Now that doesn't mean I didn't have an editor go through and do line editing, plot editing, scene editing, constructive editing. Yes, I
Mm,
definitely had people that do that, and I had an awesome team of beta readers that picked it up and tore my book apart for me. Um, but for me, just being able to say, "Hey, this is my story. This is the way I wanted it," and I could take the advice from the people who gave it
mhm,
if I chose to. I didn't have to. I wasn't contractually obligated.
mhm,
Also, I knew I could make money selling my book. Whereas being traditionally published, you're kind of you don't have the same means and you don't make the same commissions, right?
mhm,
So if you are looking at selling, for me, like my audiobooks, I make like $6 every time an audiobook sales, $6 to $12 depending on how people buy it. For a
mhm,
paperback book, I make like $3 or $4 a book. For an ebook, I make like $1 or $2 for a hardcover. I typically really only sell hardcovers through my Kickstarter, even
mm,
Kickstarters, even though I do have them on sale online because people want them signed and they want the special swags that I put in there with them. Um, but I make more off of those than traditionally published authors make off of their books when they sell them because I'm cutting out that middleman. So
mhm. Yeah, yeah. So you've got quite a epic layout in sort of a modern setting
yeah.
in your books. Was it hard to bring that classic epic theming into that setting?
So yes. So I love swords. I love swords, and I love classic, tropes.
Mhm,
Um, and up until that time, because I mainly read more classic fantasy, I was really thought I was being super original and nobody had any of those same ideas as me, but obviously, and just so anybody who's a new writer out there, write what you love what you write, whatever that means, right? But also just tell your story, because while your story may have a lot of similarities with other things, your characters, their reasonings, their motivations, that's on you. That's your dream and passion. It doesn't matter if you read another book like, oh, I was going to name my magic this way, or I was also going to destroy the ring in a mountain, and I wish I would have, wrote that for. It's going to be out there. Just make it your own.
Mhm, mhm,
But the hard part for me was with making it more modern is how modern do I want it to be, and then because like what do we want to have versus what do we not want to have. And
mhm,
so my book is on the cusp of industrialism. Like I said, you said it's very steampunk-esque. So
mhm,
there's, mechanisms and machinery, but some of that stuff is powered by magic, and
mm,
some of it's powered by actual steam power, like combustion. Um, and so there's black powder, but it's not like if and this is where I get into my history nerdy side of myself. The first firearms were being used in battle in the late 1400s, and
mhm,
if you look at a lot of like Elizabeth, like Renaissance suits and armor, which we think of knights in like the shining armor, we're like in this. That's the 1600s. I mean, they shot armor with bullets, and that's what that marking on that armor was. That's what this term was came from. So the proof, the proofing, and it's just like so you just got to work it around and make it make sense. Uh,
mhm,
and you know, my main character is he suffers from PTSD, and so it's really fun with him because he has very real reasons why firearms aren't his favorite thing,
mhm,
whereas like other people in the story are more embracing of it. So I think it's and that was another thing that was really challenging with writing a book that is moving more into modernism without interjecting modern politics. How do you look at a world at that time in that place and say how does it make sense? And you have to think about it realistically. If you have like in mind there's an empire, right, or it's a
mhm,
republic, and
mhm,
it's spanning multiple nations.
mhm,
Well, they're going back to independence. They're kind of break slow. They're not fighting each other, but they're kind of like shifting and breaking apart. So there's a lot of like geopolitical issues that are going on there, and which was a lot of fun.
mm.
So for my nerds in the group, they're like, "Oh yeah, that sounds really fun." For people who just like punch, punch, bang, bang, maybe not so much fun.
I was gonna say when I was skimming over it because you're a newer author to me, I actually got some slightly more steampunkish versions of Castle in the Sky by Studio Ghibli, and
Oh
I
yeah.
but with like an epic fantasy thrown into that environment.
Oh yeah. That's high praise. So thank you. I appreciate that. Studio Ghibli puts out some amazing. I love their stuff. It's so pretty.
It is, and you've got the epic world building down in your book. Are you a planner or did you just come up with these off your head?
So okay. So there's a whole like plotter versus pantser thing.
Mhm.
I am a plotting pantser.
Mm.
Um, so I plotted my world. Like I created everything down to like the different religions and the different countries and the different political part, like the difference between if this is a republic and this is a kingdom and this how would this like and how trade would work, and like I did all of that and I plotted all that out. I plotted out the magic system, how the magic system works. It
Mm.
is if I was to pendulum swing it, it's not as hard as like a Sanderson magic or like in the fantasy. If you look at like indie, like I loved Threadlight. I think by Zach Argyle, it's one of my favorite indie works that I've read. It's got a very hard magic system, and you understand it really, really well. Whereas mine, maybe not quite that hard,
Mm.
but it's a lot more than like a Narnia where it's just like, oh, things are just happening. You know, well, there's no real rhyme or reason. So there's rules, but it's not quite as hard as others. But so that was all very well plotted. But my story doesn't have per se like a magical MacGuffin in the sense that
Mhm.
they're characters in a world interacting and reacting together, and I don't necessarily plot out how those interactions go. I just try to get in the head of the characters and see where it takes me.
Right. So a little bit of both, the best of both worlds.
I try. Sometimes, I'll sit down and I can write, 2,500 words in 30 minutes, and sometimes I sit down for 2 hours and I write three, and I go, well, that was really tough. So, to each their own. Some days is good, some days not so much.
Yes. And if you're watching and you'd like to see more about the book we're talking about, check out The Last Son of the Feromage series. It's in the description box, so you can just click the link there. It'll take you straight to David's Amazon. But in Birthrights, you have a couple different, I don't know if at odds is the right word, groups that are sort of stuck having to work together at some point.
Yeah.
Which one do you feel was more relatable to you as the author?
So this is real. This is a good question. I love this question. So thank you for asking. So Birthrights is two major stories going on side by side, and then another one happening in the background that you don't realize really until it gets a little bit further. So you have the main character of the whole saga, which is Darius. So he is the last son of the Feromage saga. He is the last son of the Feromage. So I'm not spoiling anything by saying his name, right? But he is I would say the titular main character. And he is on. I love Greek stories. I love Greek literature. I read the Iliad and the Odyssey. I love the Peloponnesian War. I read all of those great stories. I love that Herculean, Odyssean like journey, and he's on this journey of self discovery and self worth. Um, Now, without getting into spoilers, he was doing something really big. Something happened, and now he's trying to come to grips of like who he is in this world.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of his story. A lot of Darius and a lot of the things that he experienced, I poured a lot of my personal emotions into that came from those darker times. So some of those, he has some PTSD, he has some anxiety, some some things that he's dealing with on an emotional. So for as a trigger warning, if you do deal with a lot of anxiety, depression, and stuff like that, this he does experience those, and I'm by no means a therapist,
Mm-hmm.
but those are things and feelings and emotions that I experience with like anxiety and panic and stuff like that that I kind of put into him.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, you have Felix crew, and I wanted to introduce Aaliyah in a very unique way. And so instead of starting her off as like the main focal point from this side, I introduce her through the eyes of her crew that she's a part of. And then slowly we get it turns more and more into her perspective so you can understand who she is through other people, and then you see who she really is on the inside.
Mm.
And she was exceptionally hard to write for me
Oh, wow.
because we are very different in almost every aspect. And so how do I, me as my type of person that I am, get into the mind of this individual that has had very traumatic things happen to her in her life. She is been abused and oppressed by her community and her world. She's a member of a thieving crew because her father was taken to prison when she was very young. Now, I started this in 2018. I just want everybody to know I started writing this in 2018. Her family dies of a plague that comes through, her mother and her brother, and
Mm.
she watches as her mother and brother dies beside her of a plague. It's what turns her hair white.
Mm.
It's called the white fever. And so that was one of the things that like also pushed me into more steampunk Renaissance era is all of the people, all the uppers, they dye their hair bright colors so you can't tell that they had had the white fever, whereas
Oh,
like
wow.
the poor class they don't have the money to go keep it up, so you can always tell the poor class who had got it because they
Mm-hmm.
just have. And Aaliyah has very white hair, and it's like, oh, so that's obviously that you were afflicted by this.
Mm-hmm.
So she just went through a lot, and she found sort of a found family. uh so there's that found family trope, I guess you could say, but it's because of her own self. She doesn't really ever. There's just rigidity there.
Mhm.
So it was a lot of fun to write her, but it's very challenging. I have sensitivity readers and a couple of, like my wife and a couple of my other female friends. I always really make sure I have them read over all of her parts because it's hard. It's hard if you've never, as an author, like I had no idea how hard it was going to be to like put myself in a position that I've never been in.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I second that too. Is writing characters who are not like you is good because it
Mhm,
stretches you, but then you also need those sensitivity readers or those people to say, have you thought about it from this angle or did you think about that from that angle? It's
absolutely.
really good. Um, one of the questions I have for you is there romance between them in the book?
So I definitely have romance in the book. Um, my second book is a lot more romance driven than my first book. Now, Aaliyah, she is with a member of the crew, and I don't want to spoil anything, so I got to be
You got
really.
to read it.
I'm trying to. Well, I don't want to like ruin anything, but she is with a member of the crew. They are working through a lot of different things. The person that she's with has been kind of deposed from her family, and so they are together. But then Darius, there's some pretty close writing on the walls at the end. I will say Darius and Aaliyah do not get together. They are. Aaliyah is not at all interested in him in any way, shape, or form. So I'll leave it at that. So they're
Yeah.
on totally different journeys. So
Yeah, you gotta read the book to see where the
yeah,
romance is.
but there is romance. And book and my novella Azure Tides
Mhm.
definitely is a lot more romantic. It's also a lot more YA. So if you look at like birthrights, Darius is, I don't want to say middle aged, but he's an adult, right? He's
Mhm.
probably 30 in his like late 20s, early 30s. Aaliyah's in her mid 20s, so they're not like brand new, fresh off the boat, which is a joke I'm
Mhm.
going to use because Azure Tides is all on a boat the whole time, and
Yeah.
it's a bunch of 16, 17 year olds. Um, the main character in that one, Seamus, is very much, uh, a young man and dealing
Mhm.
with young man things, and the main female cast is Unapua. She is very much in control. She comes from like a high noble family, and she is what's called a wave guider, and she's
Mm.
out to sea learning how to control and guide water. So
Mm. Exciting. So you've
it's a
got
lot of
sort of
fun.
you've,
There's pirates and vampires galore in that one, so
so you
a
got
lot of fun.
pirates and vampires and stuff in the one book, and then in the other book you've got thieves and assassins and all of that stuff there.
And I'm working on book two to smack them both together, and and then let everything burn around them. So
Yes. So you put out book one at the end of
mhm,
2021.
mhm.
Is there any indication of when we might see book two?
So I again like I did Azure Tides. It is out. I just released it this spring. Book
Congratulations.
two. And just so you know, if anybody's listening, if they want to jump in, you can start with either one. Originally, they were both in one book, but because they take places at two different parts of the world, and those characters never cross over in that book, it
Mm,
made more sense to deconnect them and give Azure Tides its own place. But that's
mm,
why it's not called Book Two because it's
mm.
taking place as a companion novel. I am hoping to have Book Two. So I've already wrote the first two drafts of book two. I'm hoping to have book two in my editor's hands this fall. So
Yay!
uh, the cover art, I cannot reveal anything yet because I haven't paid for any of it yet. But
Mhm.
I have sent it out to a small group of people. I got permission from Aaron, and it is super, super exciting. It is going to look really, really good. So I'll let you know whenever that's done, and you can throw it up on your webpage to kind of
Absolutely.
share and see it. But I'm hoping for a winter release, but I will probably wait to push it out until probably next March,
Mhm.
just to make sure it's perfect. It's going to be bigger than book one, and Birthrights is not a small book.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm. Yes. And so if you're watching and you have not heard of the series, you have time to finish Birthright or book
and
two.
yeah, and Birthrights is on audiobook.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
it's narrated by Henry Kramer, who is the son of Michael Kramer and Kate Redding. And if you
Oh,
listen to
wow.
audiobooks, those are the voices of like the Wheel of Time, the Stormlight Archives, the Mistborn books, just a bunch of like well-known huge just fantasy staples. He's fantastic, and he will be recording Azure Tides in March, and that should be ready
Oh,
to go by the end of March, if not by middle March.
wow. What was your experience like as an indie author finding a narrator and producing an audiobook?
Full transparency, really depressing to start with. It is so expensive and so hard. But all the narrators I talked to were awesome. It was just finding somebody that I could afford. I
Mhm.
didn't have I didn't have a negative experience with a single narrator. The hard part was timing. These people are professionals and they're booked out, sometimes 6 to 9 months
Mm.
or even further. Henry got picked up, which is super exciting for me because rising tides raises all ships, right? He got picked
Yes.
up for a 6 book series in between the recording of Birthrights and me finishing Azure Tides. So
Wow.
Azure Tides was supposed to be recorded at release.
Mhm.
Well, it got pushed because I didn't have a finished manuscript, and he got a 6 book deal, which congratulations to him, congratulations to me, because I mean, the more famous he gets, the more they'll look at his other recordings, and I'll be one of his top ones on there. And
Mhm.
so I think it's awesome. I'm super
Yeah.
excited for him, but it's really hard because it can be very expensive. But ACX, if you go through Audible, they have a couple different options. So I didn't know about ACX when I started. I had no idea, and I went into this totally blind. As
Oh,
an
wow.
author, as I didn't do any kind of like forethought. I just kind of jumped into it, and I got really, really lucky. I met some amazing people on IFA, the Indie Fantasy Addicts page, and that's where I met you.
Yeah.
So
That's a
uh,
Facebook group for people who are
it's
watching. If you are like David and I and you can't seem to quit reading, you can go over and listen to all the cool indie book recs.
and it's awesome because like here's the one thing that indie authors do really well. They give away free books all the time. I actually have way too many books that I'm like trying to get shoved into my playlist because they're awesome. But you know, it's not uncommon for an audio narrator to charge between $200 to $700 an hour, which is a
Mm,
lot. Because if you look
mhm,
at like Birthrights, it's like a 21-hour long book, and so you
mhm.
start to do the math real quick. And I'm not wealthy. I don't have an independent estate.
Yeah.
I've got 3 kids, and so for me, Kickstarter was what really, really saved my bacon, because
Mhm,
I was able to take the cost to turn the book into an audio book and offset it by using Kickstarter, and that was the only way I was able to do it.
mhm. Yeah. And there is a video for the author who asked on my indie author behind the scenes playlist, where I
Mhm.
brought in 4 narrators last year to talk about different options you have through the ACX and
Absolutely.
outside. So I learned a lot. If you're watching as an indie author, you can go check them out. And a lot of them will answer questions like Jillian Yetter.
Amazing.
She told me, hey, even if you're not going to get your books done in audiobook, and I've only ever had one done because it is expensive and an investment, that you should go on the ACX and claim your book so that nobody else can, and just stuff that I
Absolutely.
never realized. It was really helpful.
Well, and I just want to on that, it is extremely expensive. I'm not going to argue that at all, but let me tell you that the most of my reoccurring revenue I get is from my audiobooks.
Hmm.
Audio consumption is on the rise with people going, but still wanting to, listen to stories. Um, I think it's an excellent source of entertainment. And like for me with 3 kids, um, I can't sit down. The only hour that I have each day to sit down where I'm not being disturbed is the hour I spend writing. And if I
Mm,
don't write, I don't get my next book done. So my people want me to write. So I gotta use that hour wisely. But I mean, I have a commute to work, and so I listen while I work. So, or on my way
wow.
to work, not while I work. I cannot do it while I work.
Wow. Oh, so a little bit of everything. You're working, you're dadding, you're writing, you're audiobooking, you're doing it all. Um, I know this is your lunch break, so I'm going to leave you with one more question and then we'll let you go. But do you have any in person events to add to all that hectic scheduling this year?
So in-person events, I do signings at a local bookstore in Fort Smith. I don't have anything on the calendar right now. I wish I did, but I just got back from one in December. We had a fantastic event at Bookish. So if you're in Arkansas or close to Arkansas, there's a little bookshop in Fort Smith. If you're on the Oklahoma border, it's called Bookish, an indie shop for people who love to read, and it is just the quaintest little bookshop. I absolutely love it. The owner's name is Sarah. She's fantastic, and she stocks my stuff, and I go in there every once in a while, and I'll do a book signing. Unfortunately, where I live, we don't have a place that does book signings. It's just crazy. We have a Books a Million, but not a Barnes and Noble, and it's actually quite challenging to do a book signing at a Books a Million, whereas Barnes and Noble is a little bit easier to work with. Um,
Mm,
but it is. I've loved it. I've done 4 different in-person author events. They've each been just a great time.
mm. Well, thank you so much, everybody. If you would like to connect with David, I have dropped David's link in the description box as well as the books. So go check it out. Give David a follow on Facebook and keep up with Kickstarters and everything that is coming, hopefully for book two soon. And thank you so much for taking
Thank
time on
you.
your lunch break to be with us today.
Oh, it's what I love to do. I'm on the phone all day at work anyway, so this is great.
Well, thank you again. And thank you, everybody, for watching. If you have any questions and you're watching the replay, please drop them in the comments and I'll make sure that they get to David. And otherwise, come on back tomorrow. We will have a different group of authors doing live reads and interviews tomorrow. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank y'all.
Bye.